start this 5-0. We just want to kind of.
South Carolina. Said great job on this. reached out. No, it's fine.
Kathy's playing racquetball and has errands and stuff. And Renee is up for something like this.
Yeah, I was thinking about her because I thought, well, we're going to put rice up this stuff.
It's easy for me to hop on the L and yeah.
That's gorgeous. How's everybody doing? Okay.
How are you? I know you got some things up. Are you all right? No? Didn't you have some health issue lately? No? Okay, all right. I'm misremembering that. Well, good. Glad to hear it.
I had a horseback riding accident 14 years ago.
14 years ago. I don't think that's when I was. So, yeah, we all have various doctor's appointments.
We're all getting to that age. It's our turn, right?
Yeah. But no, we're okay.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi.
Can you hear okay? Okay. On behalf of the Eastland Disaster Historical Society, we would like to thank you all for being here today. It's our honor and privilege to welcome you, including our Facebook Live audience, during our nation's 250th anniversary. My name is Barbara Decker-Wachholtz. I'm here with my husband, Ted Wachholtz, our executive director of our society. I'm also here with my sister Susan, who is streaming us on Facebook right now. Susan and I are descendants of a survivor of the Eastland disaster. Our 14-year-old grandmother survived the tragedy right here, along with her entire family. We were one of the fortunate families that came out okay. Everyone was okay. My grandmother was with her 9-year-old sister, Solveig. They were with their mother, who was our great-grandmother, and our great-grandmother's brother, who was a Western Electric employee. And they were invited to go along as his guests for the day. And the stories we heard from our grandmother growing up was that she was so excited to board this huge ship. And, you know, you see the big boats on this river and you think, wow, that's cool. But to imagine this huge steamer parked between Clark and LaSalle, and for a young girl and her little sister to board this huge ship was very exciting. Anyway, they took seating on the middle deck, in between decks, because it was too crowded up on top. And when the ship rolled over, they were trapped between decks for many, many hours until they were pulled through a porthole to safety. And we remember her saying that in addition to her knowing how to swim as a young girl, that certainly aided in her safety and her survival. They had to tread water for many hours and hold on to whatever debris was floating in this huge compartment. And she saw things that were not pleasant at all for a young girl. But what she said gave her inspiration was the fact that when the ship rolled over, they fortunately were on the side that was facing up. And she could look through the porthole and see the sky. And she just had such hope that she would be able to be pulled through, which she and her family were. And as we have always said, my sister and I, if our 14-year-old grandmother had not survived, my sister Susan and I would not be here with you today. And that goes for so many other families, and another family that's here with us today. 111 years ago, more than 7,000 people arrived at this area along the Chicago River. They were going to depart for the 5th annual employee picnic of the Western Electric Hawthorne Works factory. More than 2,500 of the ticket holders boarded the SS Eastland, which was docked right here to my right. Shortly after boarding had been completed, the Eastland rolled into the Chicago River, silencing the voices of 844 souls. We're here today to ensure that the 844 victims, their families, the survivors, and the responders are all remembered. Thank you. We'd like to acknowledge a few people at this moment before we continue. Andreas Morgan for purchasing and donating all the flowers used today. The beautiful wreath that is up at the corner of LaSalle by our memorial plaque, the floral spray that the United States Coast Guard will place into the river, as well as the floral petals that the audience is welcome to place into the river at the end of our ceremony. Thank you, Andreas. And we'd also like to thank Marnie Sherrick of Sherrick Designs Floral Studio in Pullman. She donated time in designing and arranging the various flowers. Thank you, Marnie. And also Maria at Jolie Fleur Flower Boutique. She donated the use of her studio and the delivery of all the arrangements. Thank you, Maria. And real quickly, I'd like to ask those of you who have a personal connection, whether it was to a survivor, a victim, a responder, or a bystander, if you would please stand.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. As Barb introduced me, I'm Ted Wacholtz, Executive Director of the Eastland Disaster Historical Society. Just a couple of quick announcements about two books that have been recently released that at least have part of the books dedicated to the Eastland disaster. Graham Harrison Lee, who is the grandnephew of June Fujita. June Fujita was one of the first photographers to arrive on the scene of the tragedy. Most of the photographic record that exists that's prevalent today was taken through his camera. He was a Japanese American that worked for the local newspaper, and he also was the first on the scene at the St. Valentine's Day fire, and he also captured the Chicago race riots, among many other events in his career. So his grandnephew, Graham, wrote a book about June's life story, and it includes many of his photographs, definitely from the Eastland disaster, as well as the other events, and some of his personal photography as well. Graham will be down at the Cicero Public Library tomorrow from 11 a.m. until 12:30, doing a speaking engagement, talking about his granduncle, June Fujita, and copies of his book will be available at the library with Graham. So if you have time tomorrow, please be sure to head down to Cicero. Secondly, we have a gentleman that's with us today, Robert Patrick Conlon. He wrote a book titled Celtic Knot. Bob wrote a gripping historical novel based on the true story of Bob's grandfather, an 8-year-old Irish immigrant who escapes a harsh orphanage in 1885 and survives on the rough and tumble streets of Chicago. The novel follows his family's journey through some of Chicago's defining moments, including the Eastland disaster. So I'd like us to welcome Bob to say a few words about his grandfather and the book he wrote.
Thank you very much, Ted. It truly is an honor to speak here today. Okay, right up against it. Here we go. As Ted mentioned, my novel, Celtic Knot, is based on the story of my grandfather, who sadly was orphaned at the age of 8 in 1885 and truly lived on the streets. It's a simultaneous coming-of-age story of Tim in the city of Chicago. Tim's life intersected with several historic Chicago events, including the Iroquois Theater fire and the Eastland disaster. He observed how the city and its amazing citizens rallied around one another. Each time tragedy struck, Chicago tirelessly rebuilt itself and strived to become the world-class city it is today. In particular, Tim was haunted by the memory of the Eastland, which I thoroughly researched and chronicled in Celtic Knot to honor the victims and their families. We are standing on hallowed ground. We are gathered to remember the 844 souls that so tragically perished 111 years ago today, Chicago's deadliest day. Today, the calm waters of the Chicago River quietly drift past us and whisper the sounds of that fateful morning. If you listen closely, you can hear the echoes of the excited murmur from the 2,573 Western Electric factory workers, mostly immigrants, and their families as they joyfully lined up and crossed over the gangplank to board the SS Eastland at dawn. Listen even closer. Instead of the bustling sounds of the city we hear right now, the air on that overcast Saturday morning was filled with music from a ragtime band, children's laughter, and the bright chatter among co-workers. They gathered along this very wharf, right over here, wearing their Sunday best. Children carried picnic baskets, mothers held infants, and young couples held hands and danced. The ship beneath their feet was a fragile illusion, top-heavy and plagued by stability issues that were blatantly ignored by the ship company owners, the crew, and government inspectors. Little did the happy passengers know that an incoherently large number of them would never touch land again. At 7:28, in a terrifyingly slow motion, the boat, massive boat, listed 60 degrees to the port side. At 7:30, with a horrifying groan of shifting steel, came the wreck of the SS Eastland. Carl Sandburg, who was a reporter at the time and witnessed it, wrote, "Like a dead jungle monster shot through the heart, the Eastland rolled over and perished." The Chicago Herald wrote the next day, "In an instant, the surface of the river was black with struggling, crying, frightened, drowning humanity. We infants floated about like corks." Countless brave Chicagoans and rescuers tried to save as many passengers as they could, but the wailing and screaming turned to utter silence. The rescue efforts turned into a recovery operation. The tragedy tore the heart out of Chicago's working class communities, leaving neighborhoods wrapped in a blanket of silent grief. Yet the world moved on. No one was rich or famous on board the Chicago's Titanic, and it was quickly forgotten. But we are here today because memory is an act of love. We stand 20 feet from where they fell to tell them they are not forgotten, to gather to honor our ordinary, beautiful, hardworking fellow citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Bob will be staying after the program to sell and sign copies of his book if anyone is interested there. And again, be sure to head out to Cicero tomorrow to visit with Graham. And just real quickly, so we have these two books by the two authors. There's an interesting little connection between the two, ironically enough. Many, if not all, of the photos from the Eastland disaster that Bob included in his work on his grandfather, those photos came from the camera of June Fujita. For many years, the U.S. Coast Guard has played a significant role in the Eastland disaster. 111 years ago, they were here to respond to what at that time was largely a recovery effort, more so than a rescue effort. But nonetheless, they were here, and they've been here almost every year over the last 20-plus years that we've been down commemorating the anniversary of the Eastland disaster. So their efforts did not conclude shortly after the tragedy. They continue today. Joining us today from the Coast Guard to commemorate the 111th anniversary is Commanding Officer T.J. Bigay of the U.S. Coast Guard Marine Safety Unit Chicago. We have actually 3 different Coast Guard units represented here today. The Marine Safety Unit Chicago, Sector Lake, Michigan, in Milwaukee, and Station Chicago. Please welcome TJ.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. This is my second time having the opportunity to be here at the Eastland Disaster Memorial, and I am honored to be here. Mr. Ted, thank you to the Eastland Disaster Historical Society for once again bringing us together to remember the victims, honor the heroes, and ensure that the lessons of the SS Eastland are never forgotten. 111 years ago, these waters became the scene of one of the deadliest maritime disasters within the Great Lakes. In a matter of minutes, 844 lives were lost, leaving families forever changed, and a city united in grief. Today, we pause to remember those victims, to honor the loved ones who carried that loss for generations, and to recognize that behind every number, behind each of those 844 lives, was a person with hopes, dreams, and a loving family. We also remember the extraordinary courage displayed that day. The Coast Guard, Chicago Police, Chicago Fire Departments, along with countless ordinary yet heroic citizens, responded without hesitation, risking their lives to save others. Their selfless actions became part of Chicago's enduring history of service and action. The Eastland disaster fundamentally changed the course of marine safety in the United States. It helped shape stronger vessel safety standards. It improved life-saving and stability requirements. For the members of Team Coast Guard serving Chicago and across southern Lake Michigan, the Eastland tragedy is more than just history. It informs our daily missions. Every vessel inspection, facility inspection, marine event permit that we review, every coordinated response with state, local, and federal partners is driven by a shared conviction that no one should ever have to endure this level of grief again. But the Coast Guard cannot and does not do this alone. The safety of this complex shared waterway requires shared oversight. And just as we did in 1915, today we work shoulder to shoulder not only with agency partners but with our maritime industry partners committed to safety and preparedness to prevent tragedy before it occurs. The Eastland will always be part of Chicago's past, and we must ensure that its lessons remain part of its future. This is how we best honor those we remember today. Thank you.
Thank you, TJ, and all the members of the Coast Guard that are here today. And of course, absolutely thank you for your service to this country. Another round of applause, please. There we go. Bob earlier talked about his grandfather, who was Irish. He was an Irish immigrant. His involvement in the Eastland disaster, and I don't recall if Bob mentioned his grandfather also connecting through part of the Iroquois theater fire, but that was part of his grandfather's legacy as well. So today what we'd like to do is come right back to the Irish that's covered in Bob's book, and talk about a family that was also affected not only by the Eastland disaster, but the Iroquois theater fire as well. And actually, their extended family, the family is the Plamondon family. The Plamondon family not only was affected by the Eastland disaster and the Iroquois theater fire, they also were impacted by the Lusitania, the sinking of the Lusitania, as well as the Great Chicago Fire. But we're here today to honor and remember Susan Byrne Plomondon. She was a wife and mother. Her husband, Edmund Kelly, known as E.K. E.K. worked at the Western Electric facility, and of course, he had plans with his family to be part of the all-day picnic event. E.K., his wife, Susan, two of their daughters, all came down to the wharf, to the Chicago River, to participate in the picnic and excursion. They left two daughters and a young son at home. So, of the family of 7, 4 of them were here. E.K.'s brother and 2 other members of his brother's family also came down for the picnic. So in total, the Plomondon family was represented by 2 different families totaling 7 people. They all boarded. They all were thrown into the Chicago River as the Eastland rolled over. E.K. saved one of his daughters. The other family was saved, and the other family actually saved one of the other daughter of E.K., and then Susan was also reported as being saved. So all 7 were thrust into the river and survived the Eastland disaster. A little bit later, E.K. and his 2 young daughters were taken to St. Luke's Hospital for recovery purposes, for restoring their health and helping them as they could. And while he was there, someone told him, yes, your wife isn't here, but she was saved. So as E.K. and his 2 daughters returned home probably later that afternoon, maybe in the morning, when he arrived at home, it was then that he was told that no, unfortunately, his wife did not survive. There have been attempts made, of course, to save her, but Susan Byrne Plomondon actually did perish in the Eastland disaster. So looking back at that, if you can try and imagine the trauma that E.K. and his family went through, first of all, they had to experience the tragedy. That was enough to begin with for that morning. Then he, for a little while at least, felt that his whole family had been spared, and then only later did he find out, no, he lost his wife. So now at this point, again, just more trauma. Now he's having to face the realization that he lost his wife and mother of their 5 children, and he would be a single parent at that point in time, continuing to raise his 5 children. So we don't know exactly the sequence of events that led to the identification of his wife's body at the morgue, but what we do know, that's documented in the historical record, is that E.K. himself did not go to the morgue to identify his wife. Instead, it was Susan's brother, I believe, that went to the morgue for the identification. And as I was saying, we don't really know for certain, but a big part of me feels that E.K. was probably just too traumatized, just couldn't face more bad news by having to go to the morgue and identify his wife's body. We don't know that, like I said, but so as we've reviewed this family's story and worked with their descendants, it's 111 years later, and we're still learning today just how traumatic it really was. We always hear about 844 people, and that certainly is very traumatic, but when you really distill it down to the individual families, the individuals themselves, review exactly what they went through that morning, and for many of them days, weeks, months, years later, their lifetimes. It's really hard to fathom, even as we're learning more and more information 111 years later. So rest in peace, Susan Byrne Plamondon. It's been a privilege to share your name and a little bit of your story, and through all of us here, and for years to come, we'll continue to remember you. Thank you.
As we now conclude our ceremony, the Coast Guard will place flowers into the Chicago River, and we will observe a moment of silence. At this time, we invite those who wish to come forward and place a handful of petals into the river in memory of those who were affected by the Eastland disaster. And you can go right over here onto this little dock, or here, wherever you'd like.
Thank you. We remember the heroes who came to the rescue. We remember the survivors who lived to tell the story. And we remember the 844 souls that Chicago lost. And this concludes our ceremony, and we just want to thank everyone who came today. Thank you so much.